Hello, I'm David and welcome back to the Kickstand, where I work to have a down-to-earth conversation about bicycles and bike life. For the month of March, I want to talk about bicycle service and maintenance. Whether you ride often or just occasionally, maintaining your bike and getting to know your bike is important for the longevity of your bike and to make sure that it functions correctly when you need it to. We'll go over different levels of maintenance and maintenance schedules, including maintenance and checks that you might want to do before every ride, checkups and maintenance that you want to do every few weeks to every few months, and service that you want to make sure that you're checking on and wear on your bike that you want to check maybe annually. And then finally we'll talk a little bit about what an overhaul of your bike looks like that you may do annually or as you need, depending on how much you ride your bike. In this episode, I want to focus on maintenance and service and checks that you would want to do every month or every few months to make sure that your bike is functioning correctly, how parts that wear out are wearing, and if anything needs to be replaced as you ride. I'm mainly doing this because I've had a bike hanging up for probably over a year and it's going to have some cobwebs. I'll go over the checks that you want to do in order to get it ready to ride. Before I bring the bike in, there are a few items that I'll go over that will help make it a little bit easier to check on your bike. The first is a towel or some kind of blanket or drop cloth to put on any surface that you might be working on. We're actually going to work on this table here. A tape measure, doesn't have to be metric. Compact one is nice. A bike pump. A pair of gloves is nice if your bike is dirty. And that's about all that we're going to need. You might get a piece of paper and a pencil just so that you can write down some of the information, the checks that we're going to go through, but that's not necessary. That's up to you on if you want to keep notes on what we're looking at. So we're not going to do any work on the bike at this point. What we're doing is a check through the bike to see what it is that we need to have done to the bike in order to make it ready to ride. And I almost forgot, something else you might want to include is a dry or slightly damp rag, because you can use that to wipe down portions of the bike. So I'm going to put the bike up on the table here so that the drive here, our pedals and chain and all that, are facing. Get this to fit in the camera frame all right. Since we're putting this upside down, just be very careful of the elements on your handlebars here. You don't want to do any damage to any of your shifters or anything that you have on your handlebars. And as you can see, we have our rear drive on the wheel here, and we have our crank, so we can get to all that, and our wheels. The reason I'm doing this upside down on a table is because I realize that a lot of the videos I watch have a repair stand, and not a lot of people I know have a repair stand. If you have to do any checks on your bike while you're riding, you may end up needing to put your bike upside down in order to do those checks. All right. So because my bike is a bit dirty, I am going to throw on a pair of gloves. I can already see on the front wheel here that I have cobwebs. So we're going to actually start from the front and we're going to work our way backward here on the bike. And the first thing that we're going to start with are the wheel and the brakes. So I can feel this tire, and we're not interested in whether or not it's at the right pressure at this point. We would use a pressure gauge or use our bike pump in order to make sure that it's at the right pressure. But what I want to make sure is that it isn't flat. And this front tire is not flat. I also want to give the wheel a spin and inspect the tire. This helps me see wear and tear that I may have forgotten about since it's been hanging up for so long. And it looks like the tire is pretty good wear. I also want to check my valve. This style is called a Presta valve. I may go through a video on the difference between Presta and Trader valves, but this one is a Presta. I just want to inspect it to see if there's any damage to the parts of the valve, and it looks like it's pretty good. The other thing that I want to do is see if the wheel is noticeably out of true, if there's a noticeable wobble. And one of the ways that I'm going to inspect that just for inspection purposes is I'm going to see how the wheel does between the brakes here. I'm not looking at the tire, I'm actually looking at the rim and the brakes, and see how it moves in and out toward the brake. And I can see that there's a tiny bit of drag. I can see that the wheel might need a little bit down the road, but for our purposes, just something to check on, and it looks like it's pretty good. The other thing that we're going to check here is that our brakes are functioning, so we're going to give it another spin. We're going to take our front brake and just give it a pull. And again, I can see that part of this brake is actually a little out of alignment and hitting the wheel. I know that we'll need to make some adjustments to the brakes and maybe the rim down the road. And we're going to pinch these spokes. And all that we're doing is, again, we're not looking for anything about the true of the wheel, just looking to see if anything seems loose. Now, if the wheel had a real wobble to it, there might be a spoke in here that is really loose, and we just want to check on them and make sure that our spokes are in good shape. So that is our front wheel, and a little bit on the brake. We know that the brake is functioning all right. On this particular kind of brake, this is a caliper style brake. A lot of these have a little lever here that you can open it up. So you can take the wheel off, which we're not going to do right now. This allows the wheel to be a little more free as we're rotating it. We are also going to check the quick release here, see if it has any issues or if it's loose, if anything appears to be breaking. A lot of the quick releases have a plastic cover on one of the nuts. We want to check and see if that has any damage. This is on there good and tight, and if it wasn't, or if you notice that this was not sitting on your fork very well, you could actually open it up and make an adjustment. So as we go through the bike, we're going to go from front to back. We can check a little bit, even though it's on the table, to make sure that it's tight through what we call the head tube, this steering area. This is where the fork and what's called the steering tube, which is the part of the fork that goes through the bike and then attaches to the stem here, that can be loose, because the way that these work is they're squished together here so that the bearings that are in here are held together, and you can sometimes feel some movement. And I know from the past that this bike has been a little bit loose, so it's something that I like to check. But we just want to check it to see if there's anything very noticeable. As we go from the front to the back of the bike, we're also going to check our cables. These two cables here are shift cables. I just want to check and see if there's any rust or if there's any dirt or grime. And I can see that there is a little bit of wear on them. When you ride bikes in even dry conditions, but especially in wet conditions, you can get dirt and grime on your cables. And then as your cables travel back and forth, as you're shifting and moving them around, that can actually wear on your cable. It can also cause cable drag, which can make a noticeable difference in the way your bike is shifting. Cables need to be nice and clean, or as clean as you can get them, and they need to move along the bike very smoothly so that everything works correctly. These cables are a little dirty down here, so I'll get that when I wash them. But again, just making sure that everything is running correctly. Next, we're going to go to the crank here. We're going to actually take it and we're going to try and kind of move it back and forth. So you can move it this way around like you're pedaling the bike. You actually want to not only move it this way, but side to side. That side to side will tell you if it is loose. It, like the front of the bike here, uses bearings inside what's called the bottom bracket here with your crank, and that's how your bike turns nice and smooth. A lot of bearings in a bike. And in later maintenance, we'll actually talk about checking those bearings. But again, for this one, this bike has been stored for a while. We're just checking out what it is that needs to be done so it can be ridden and safe. So now that we've checked that this feels good side to side, I'm going to check the pedals, make sure that they spin nice and freely. Those are good. If you have pedals that use a cleat or that you clip into a pedal, I see a little bit of rust on the back of this one. You might lubricate those after you clean it to make sure that they're working correctly. This also has a platform on it as well. I check to see if the platform on the pedal has any cracks or any issues with it, and we want to make sure that it turns easily and nicely smooth. And sometimes you can get squeaks that squeak on your bike when you take it out of storage, or Maybe you've been riding it for a while and you notice, hey, there's a squeak going on my bike. Sometimes that's just your pedal and can use a little bit of lubrication in there. I also want to make sure that those pedals feel like they're in there nice and tight. We're also going to inspect this area of the crank. This is called a chain ring, and on my bike I have 3. You may have 3, you may have 2, you might have 1, but it's worth inspecting. We want to make sure that these teeth are in good shape. Now you'll probably notice that the teeth on here look like they might be worn. They're different shapes, different sizes, and on a future video we might go over why that is. But I will tell you, for a lot of that, that is intentional. So you're not looking for anything that looks like it's actually kind of carved onto the teeth. What we're looking for is, like I have a black chain ring here, we're looking for wear, where it shows silver, and especially where it looks like the metal has been peeled over on wear and tear. And I can see that there is some wear and tear on my teeth. And hopefully when we do a video on chain rings, I'll have a comparison so you can see the difference between really worn teeth and the regular teeth that are on a bike here. I also want to check and see how dirty it is inside the crank here. A lot of dust and dirt in here on different bikes can be a factor. This uses what's called a sealed bottom bracket, so it's less of an issue to have dust and dirt in there, but I have had these unthread themselves. I get bored and pedal backwards every once in a while, and because of dirt and grime in there, they can unthread themselves. So it's a good idea to inspect that as well. And also on the top here, there is a little cable carrier. We want to take a look at that and see if that's dirty, which it is a bit, and see how the cables are doing in there. They actually look pretty good. This cable right here is a brake cable, and just like our shifting cables, we want to inspect that cable. We want to take a look and see if that cable shows any wear, if there are any bends. Sometimes if you use like a bike rack, or you have it leaning up against something, or you store it where it's holding onto this top tube, if you have cables that run along this tube, they can get impinged or pinched, and it'll actually bend the cable. And if that's in a place near where your housing or what's called a cable stop is here, that can actually cause a little bit of drag in the cable, and it might not function as well as you want it to, depending on what you have going on. But we can grab the brake here and see how it's working. Check our housing here as well. Looks like it's in good shape. We're looking for cracks or breaks in the cable here that may show that moisture has gotten in there. There's some rusting, sun damage, or damage to our housing. Wear and tear, like wear on your frame here, to help. It's a kind of a pad, it's a wear guard to help reduce the wear on the frame of your bike, but also wear on the housing. We're going to take a look at our seat post binder here and make sure that it's not cracked or having any trouble as well. Now we're here at the rear wheel. We're going to do the exact same thing that we did to the front wheel. We're going to give it a little spin, and oh wow, I can really hear it dragging on the back there. So since it's dragging on that brake, it's possible that I don't have it in correctly. So I'm actually going to take the wheel here. I'm going to release the quick release, which we needed to inspect anyway, and just make sure that this wheel is seated well. I'm going to give it a turn, and that actually was it. I didn't have it in the frame quite well. I'm going to triple check. There we go. Try it again. Yep, that seemed to do it there. All right, so we check the spokes like we did on the other one, and I noticed there's a couple of spokes there that are a little more loose than the others. We just want to make a note of that. Again, we're not looking to do any maintenance to this yet. We're just doing an inspection. We'll give it another spin, and we're looking to see if this wheel is true. And again, like the front one, it looks like there may be a little bit that the wheel is off, but it's not so bad that we need to do anything about it right now. Just something to keep in mind. Hey, the pressure on this feels like it is flat. So right now, I'm going to grab the pump here. I'm going to pump this tire up. And if you want, you can check before you even put it up to inspect the bike and you notice, oh, hey, that tire is flat or that tube is flat, you can go ahead and pump it up. You don't have to get it up to pressure, but what you want to do is add just enough air to make sure that it's not losing air just because of time, because all tires and tubes lose air over time. Making sure that you check the pressure on your tires every time you ride. But we're just going to pump this up to maybe 50 or 60 psi, and we're going to make sure that it is holding air. There. So that feels better. Now as we continue the inspection, if at the end of this, that tire is flat again, we might have an issue. Or as we're inspecting it, we hear a little bit of a leak. We know we've got a tube to patch or to replace. All right, let's give it another spin. That's pretty good. All right, and now we can actually turn the crank. So I'm on the back side of it here just to be able to show you what's going on. I normally would be doing this from the front side, but for purposes of the video, I'm going to pedal it from the back end here. All right, and what we are listening for are any issues in turning this. Like we can hear that maybe there's a little bit of noise that the drivetrain is creating. That can be from the pulleys or your rear derailleur here. They sometimes get loud. The chain can squeak because it's dry. So I'm looking at my chain. It is pretty dirty, as is the back of my crank here. So again, a good clean will help this quite a bit. And I'm also going to check and see if my chain has a quick link. I do not have a quick link. So chains are put together a couple different ways. One of those ways is called a quick link. I can go over that in a future video as well, but quick link is a nice way to be able to take a chain on and off. It's one of the options that are out there. It's an option that if you want to take your chain off to clean it, makes it a lot easier than if you have to actually break the chain in order to take it off and clean it. So in this case, I might do that, but if you aren't familiar with how a chain breaker works and how to put it back together, I would recommend at some point getting a chain that uses a quick or master link. They work well. Several chain companies use them, and it can really help improve the cleaning of the chain when you can take it off and clean it separately. Right, now we're going to check the wear on the chain. And this is where we need our tape measure. So the links on the chain have a certain sizing to them. They're not all exactly the same. You may have a bike that has a unique chain. So you can take a tape measure, and there's our 12-inch point, 1 foot. We're going to find a reference point from the middle of this link, and I'm going to put that 12-inch point at the middle of the link that it is nearest. What I want to make sure is that it is less than 1/8 of an inch different from that 12-inch point, which this chain, let's get that centered there, it's right on the middle. So this chain doesn't have a lot of wear. There are other chain checking tools that you can get and use that are a little bit easier, maybe a little bit more accurate, but this gives you a nice reference. So I'll do a close-up of this chain with the chain checker, and I'll do a close-up of chain that is stretched so that you can see the difference in the two of them, so you can see where the line guides on it. Okay, so we've checked the wear on our chain, and it's good. There's not a lot of wear on it. Most chains can take up to 1,000, maybe more miles before they need to be replaced, but chains do wear out and do need to be replaced. Depends on how much you ride, how clean you keep your chain. Material and even metal from the chain working here cause a lot of friction in here and can cause greater wear, so making sure that you keep your chain clean can help in its longevity. But it's important to keep an eye on this and make sure that you replace your chain when it is very worn, or it'll begin to wear on other parts of your bike, and you will find that at some point, if your chain is very worn, you'll have to replace, say, your cassette as well, because a worn chain will begin to wear a cassette so that if you put a new chain on, it's not going to work as well. So we've checked our chain. Now we're going to go back here, to our derailleur. And again, we're checking the cable. Something you can do if you're having trouble with the bike shifting, you can actually pull the cable here a little bit. See, I'm pulling here and moving this. And that seems to be, like, this part of the cable at least is working okay. We'll go back over there and actually shift through the gears here in a moment. And I'm also going to look at my cassette, which is also dirty, just like the rest of the bike, and see if there's anything noticeable going on with the cassette. Other than having some grime, it looks like it's okay. I found bug parts, twigs that can cause issues with shifting. And while I see a tiny bit of wear on that cassette, it's not too bad. So now we have our front derailleur here and our rear derailleur. We want to make sure that everything's working okay as far as shifting goes. Oh, we did want to check the rear brake and make sure that is working. See, that little thing is closed, so I'm going to give it a spin here. And I'm going to go over here to the rear brake. And that seems to be working. I'll give it another run here, because I heard a grind when I hit it. When I applied the brake, I heard some grinding. Seems to, I mean, it's working, it's making it stop. But because I heard that little bit of metallic sound, it sounds like a little bit of grinding, I want to check the wear and tear on my brake. So those at least are working and are making the wheel stop. So we know the brakes are okay. Okay, so let's check our shifting. This is something that you'll want to be a little cautious with, because we will be working one of the standing areas of the bike. We might push it over. So we just want to be careful as we go through the shifting. But this is our front shifter here. These are, all right. Oh, this is hard from this direction. All right. There, we're shifting up through the gears into our lower gearing. Makes it easier to pedal and go a bit slower. Now we're going down. So that was pretty smooth. There is a big difference between shifting your bike like this when we don't have a load on it, when we're not riding on it. That's a big difference between how a bike functions when you actually are pedaling it and shifting it than if we have it up in a stand. But this helps us know if there's anything right away that we need to be concerned about as we're checking out our bike. If there's a rattle, or the chain doesn't seem to be shifting up or down very well, we know that we can make adjustments in order to make that work. So it seemed to be shifting okay from there. Let's shift it into a middle gear here in the back, and we'll give the front one a try. Ooh, that's a good sound. If you hear that, that sound means that there's a little bit of trouble in the way that it's shifting. So we want to make sure we keep that in mind. That sounds better. So there is a point in there where we want to make some adjustments. Something to make a note of there. So now we'll try the front shifter. Okay. So when I went into this lowest gear, or the easiest on the front shifter, it doesn't want to drop the chain down into there. So there could be a couple different reasons for that, but that is something that we need to tune and check on. So if I've been riding and going up a hill and I hadn't checked on my bike and didn't do the maintenance after the check, it's possible that that wouldn't be great, because the chain could drop, go into the gear I need it to, and I'd run out of speed. That wouldn't be very much fun. Then I'd be on the side of the road trying to figure out what's going on with my bike. Here we know something's going on and we can solve it. So that's something else that I can look at and troubleshoot before I go out on a ride. This is the reason that you want to do these checks, and especially do them before you go on a ride. Do them weekly, monthly, and if you're riding a lot and this was all set up and ready to go, some of these checks we do before every ride. That was a lot of information. All right, so we've done our first check of a bike that hasn't been out for a while. This is the kind of maintenance check that you want to do maybe monthly, maybe every few months, definitely annually. And if your bike has been in storage, say you're a seasonal rider or you're going from mountain biking to road biking this year, or you haven't had the chance to commute as often and you want to get back on your bike, this is a good check to go through in order to make sure everything's functioning on your bike. There are different references out there that you can use in order to have a good idea of what the different maintenance schedules or different maintenance checks are, including like Park Tools Blue Book. Some product manufacturers out there like Finish Line offer a little bit of guide, though I find this is a lot of information about their particular product and not as much about maintenance schedules. But still, if nothing else, and it can be a free reference, that's something that you can have that can give you a guide. And then I actually use my maintenance schedule that I received when I went to the United Bicycle Institute and got my certification years ago. They based this off of the Park Tool book, so similar reference. If you would be interested in a weekly planner that includes maintenance guide information and checks, please comment below. It's something I'm thinking about doing because I haven't found a lot of good references that offer the same kinds of maintenance checks that you might get with like an automobile, where in your automobile book, in your car book, it says you need this kind of maintenance for this many miles, and would like to see something like that for a bicycle. So that's something I'm thinking about, and if you're interested, please let me know in the comments. Okay, that's a lot of information, I know. There are a few things that we didn't touch on, like making sure that your bolts are tight on your entire bike. It's really important to make sure that your bolts are the correct tightness and torque, but I want to talk about torque and tightness in another video. A lot of these that I watch, a lot of the maintenance videos are very long, and what I didn't want to do is create another hour-long or half-hour-long maintenance video. I'll see how long this is when it's done. It's a lot more talking than I've done in a while, that's for sure. Feel a little hoarse. If your bike's been in storage for a while, you haven't ridden it for a while, or you're riding it a lot and you want to do a clean and tune to the bike, that's going to be what you want to do in order to inspect and identify any of those areas that you want to make sure you work on. In the description, I'm including a link to a bike co-op out of Minnesota. They have a nice little outline of bike maintenance, which is very similar to the one that I follow. It was actually really hard to find a good link or a good example of bike maintenance. So I think I will create one from my website and share that down the way. If you know of a link, especially like a nonprofit bike shop, a community bike shop, or a local bike shop that offers some information and maintenance scheduling, please share that in the comments below. I'm very interested in that information. Too often I see it as an opportunity to sell products, and while that's fine, we got to use all those products for that, it's nice just to have a reference that's focused on the bike and not focused on selling product. But really I wanted to focus on the bicycle and how anybody really without a lot of special gear and special equipment can work with their bike and make sure that it's ready to ride, or at least identify those areas so that if you want to work on it yourself, or if you need to take it to a shop, you'll have some more knowledge with your bike and how to work on it. Alright, that is the video. I may have missed a few things. If there's something that you noticed from maintenance that you do that I missed, please feel free to comment. If you like the content of this video and would like to see more, please subscribe. And if you like what you saw, go ahead and give it a good old thumbs up. Alright, that is our video for this week. Next week will be more maintenance, and continuing the next couple weeks in March. I look forward to seeing you next week. That's a wrap for this week. Thanks again for watching. Bye. I even have grass in this. This is terrible. I wonder if I rode in the grass and chasing spiders out of here. Spiders are one of the most common residents we find in bikes that have been stored for a while.